The Raiders officially overtake the number 1 overall draft pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, pretty much guaranteeing that the Raiders will be drafting Fernando Mendoza. It would be an absolute shocker if the Raiders were to do anything other than that. Now, there is another possibility that the Raiders can do, and I'm going to talk about that now that they have secured the number 1 overall draft pick. And just to make sure, the Raiders need to lose against the Kansas City Chiefs next week. But after getting absolutely manhandled by the New York Giants at home once again, despite the fact that I believe 100% that the Raiders were playing hard and that they were trying to win this game, they just got manhandled by the Giants. Now, the Chiefs can do the absolute same thing, and I think that the Chiefs will do it despite the fact that they don't have Patrick Mahomes. Now, let's talk about what this means. Number 1 is that the Raiders, for the first time since Jamarcus Russell, have the number 1 overall draft pick. And as long as that continues through next week, then the Raiders need to do one of two things. The Raiders need to draft their franchise quarterback. And the question is Fernando Mendoza that guy? Or should the Raiders look to the 2027 NFL draft class of quarterbacks, which is lining up to be a phenomenal draft class of quarterbacks? However, you never know from year to year if it's actually going to pan out the way that the experts say it is. Because in all reality, it could not. They could come out next year and, Manning and other guys could come out and flop, and then you're in a really bad situation. So the Raiders could draft Fernando Mendoza, in my opinion. He is the only top 10 quarterback in this entire draft. And in fact, I think he's probably the only first round quarterback in this draft, because I don't think Dante Moore is going to come out in this draft. It is possible, but I don't think he will. And even then, Dante Moore is a big risk. He could turn into a Trey Lance because you don't have enough game tape of this guy. He's only played, I think, like 16 or 17 games in his entire collegiate career. So you don't know if he's going to be ready for an NFL starting role. And the Raiders cannot sit around and wait. If you look at the fact that Jackson Dart played really well today, he has played really well in spurts throughout his entire season this year. And I think that the Raiders, they can't have a guy that's going to come in and not play right away. So you've got to make sure that your guy is ready to go from day one, because Jackson Dart, I think, is going to be a star in the NFL. And he had to go through all the growing pains this year to get to that point where now he's starting to really figure it out and he's starting to play really good football. Will that continue on next year? We'll have to wait and see. But I think that that's what the Raiders are going to have to do. I don't think that the Raiders should draft a quarterback and then sit him for a year behind Geno Smith. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Cut your losses with Geno. He is an absolute dud. Even when the Raiders' offensive line was playing decent, he still just is throwing interceptions. He's holding on the ball too long. He's not making his post-snap reads appropriately. He's a dud. Get rid of him. Gone. Now, with that being said, the Raiders could do something crazy, and that is trade back to a desperate team like the New York Jets, for example, and get a plethora of picks, including this year's first-round draft pick. They'll probably be around 5 or 6. And so you could then get best player available. And then you're waiting for next year's draft class, in which case you would keep Geno Smith for one more year. And you're just going to deal with the fact that you don't have a good quarterback and you're paying him a bunch of money, but it is what it is. I don't think the Raiders do that. I think that right now you're looking at Fernando Mendoza and he has all the intangibles that you need. And I'm really perplexed by the experts who are sitting around saying that Fernando, he's going to be a decent player in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be good. When you go and watch this dude play, he has everything you want. He is a very accurate quarterback. He has very high football IQ. He makes great pre-snap and post-snap reads. He can throw every throw out there on the football field. And he's not a statue. The dude can move, even though he's 6'5" and 225. This guy can move around with the ball and pick up yards. He's also hard to tackle. So I think that there's a couple of things here. He's not Jaden Daniels fast, and I've said this many a times now, but what he is he is bigger and more durable than a Jaden Daniels. So it doesn't matter how fantastic Jaden Daniels is of an athlete and a quarterback. If he's not on the field like this year, constantly getting injured, then it doesn't do you any real good. Kind of reminds me of RG3 back in the day with the Washington Redskins. Now you have a guy who is big and durable. I think of like a Josh Allen kind of guy where he's going to be able to take some of those NFL hits and he's just going to be there week in and week out. Does this mean that the Raiders are going to have a franchise quarterback that leads you to the playoffs year one? I don't know. The Raiders have a lot of holes that they need to fill in order to become a better team. And I don't have the confidence right now that our young players are good enough to really elevate this team. And if we draft more good players, I don't know if they'll be ready or not to really elevate this team. What I do know is you've got to start with the foundation. And the foundation, in my opinion, comes in the 2026 NFL Draft with the number 1 overall pick being Fernando Mendoza. If you draft Fernando Mendoza and then you go offensive line, you go defensive line, you build those trenches out for the future, you address some of the glaring issues in the secondary and the linebacking core with the free agency, maybe you make the playoffs, maybe you make a run. But that's going to be really hard because Patrick Mahomes will be back next year. Travis Kelce is probably retiring. I'm sure they will address that and they will go after some young talent and they're still going to be good. Now you have an ascending Denver Broncos and you have the LA Chargers. That's going to make it really difficult for the Raiders, especially in year one of Fernando's young career, to be able to compete to get into the playoffs. It'll be exceptionally difficult. One thing that will be for sure is that if the Raiders can address the offensive line and you have Ashton Jeanty being able to be really utilized the way that he should be, it's going to be a really good thing because you also have Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer as two fantastic outlets for a young quarterback. I think the Raiders could definitely have a massive improvement next year. Maybe not playoffs just because of our division is so tough, but definitely a massive improvement. And therefore, I think that the Raiders are going to utilize that number 1 overall draft pick, not trade back to a quarterback desperate team and hope for the best in 2027, but rather go get your guy now. Fernando is the dude. I think he's going to be a star in the NFL, and I don't say this lightly with most quarterbacks that are coming out year after year. If you guys have been following me for any amount of time, you know I'm very reserved on QB quarterbacks. But I do think that he would be our franchise quarterback. But, and this is a big but, the Raiders need to make all of the right moves around him for him to be successful in the NFL, because you cannot throw a rookie into the absolute disaster of an offense that we have had all year. This year, that cannot fly with a rookie quarterback. Now, the question is, would you even start him if you do draft him? Do you keep Geno Smith? I'd love to hear your opinions. Should the Raiders keep Geno for a year, have the rookie sit, get acclimated to the NFL, or just throw him to the Wolves and let whatever happens is going to happen? Drop your comments down below. Make sure you hit that like, follow, and we'll be back in the next video.